All right, Ecclesiastes 12, let us never forget that God is amazing. I don't care if it gets cliche, because in this final chapter of Ecclesiastes, I found reason for joy in this book that reminded me of days when Ecclesiastes might have been the one book in the Bible I related to more than any other. And so getting to go back to it now helps me not only with a little bit of nostalgia, but God willing, the benefit of more years of life and study, as we are calling this final chapter Hope in Season, because it's going to blend some concepts we saw in chapter 3, the famous time and season chapter of Ecclesiastes, saying there's a time and a season for everything. Most notably, or maybe most famously, a time to love and a time to hate, going on from there to talk about all of the wisdom that Solomon realized in knowing the proper season for the right thing. And so he is then going to pick up on the way in which he seemed to deal with that theme in chapter 11, as we talked about, stating that when you are young, use that as a season to prepare not only financially, but for circumstances that you can't foresee and those that you can, understanding that you only have so long before your health will begin to decline. Youth is one of those times when you can prepare for having a meaningful, healthy life, assuming or in the event that God gives you, as we mentioned, a prolonged life. And so in this chapter, he is going to spend more time discussing what it's like after the prime years have faded in this very famous passage of scripture that I'm pretty much, for the most part, just going to read, beginning in verse 1, where it says, "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, and the doors on the street are shut, when the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low." He'll continue on through about verse 7, where he'll pick up in verse 8 with a familiar theme, stating again, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity." And so he has not let go of that point that much, if not all, of life seems vain to him. However, he has still found a reason to hope and some things to actually do, understanding that the recurring theme goes to the end of the chapter where, as we said, spoiler alert, if you know much about Ecclesiastes, you know he's going to end simply stating, verse 13, "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." But before that, what we are going to get to see is not only the way in which Solomon told us to find joy in our own work, but how he found meaning in his, stating in those verses between his description of our years spent in physical decline and his conclusion of the matter. He's going to talk about in verses 9 through 12, the way in which he, beyond simply being wise, was wise with a purpose. Meaning, he didn't just write to sound smart. He wrote to, one, encourage and to say some things that were provocative, but they were designed to provoke you to making a more productive use of your life, no matter how hopeless it might seem. And so in encouraging you to find joy in your work and your purpose, he wasn't simply giving you advice. He was quite possibly showing us the way in which this very book of Ecclesiastes was a demonstration of how he found purpose in an otherwise hopeless, or as he sometimes says, vain existence.